topics today we'll be discussing will be challenges to prepare for in retirement, considerations for achieving a successful retirement, and approaches to managing income. So let's dive in. So what are some of the challenges to prepare for retirement? Here's one of our first challenges that we have for retirement. This is quite a chart and quite a large mountain. Well, let's start at why are we even looking at this? Well, the reason why it's so important is because do you know that there's approximately 10,000 people retiring every day? That's quite a few people. And it's important to focus in on saving for retirement, and that's the one side of the mountain. But then there's also another challenge, and that's the downside or the green side of the mountain called managing income for retirement. Now, the saving for retirement, that's when we're accumulating our wealth, we're taking monies out of our paycheck, and then we're putting that into our 401k or retirement accounts. So we're in a wealth accumulation mode. And then when we get to the top of the mountain, we're at that point looking at, okay, we've accumulated our wealth, we're now ready for retirement. But there's so many decisions on your retirement. Like, for example, how long do we think we're going to live? How much should I withdraw from my retirement accounts? If I have Social Security, then when should I claim it? What about inflation? Will this be enough? So there's quite a few decisions and there's quite a few concerns when you're going into retirement, ready for retirement, or already in retirement. So let's take a look at those. Now, the first risk while you're in retirement is called longevity. So longevity is your plan of living. How long is your lifespan? And this longevity, we typically are looking at spending 25 to 30 years in retirement. If we look at this graph, it shows a lifespan probability after you reach age 65. Okay, let's say we're 65 today. Then we have a 93% probability that we're going to live to age 70. And then if you look down the bar chart a little bit longer, at 85, we have about a 50% chance that we're going to be living till 85. So what is all this telling us? This is telling us, thanks to modern medicine, that we're going to be living longer. The bad news is that we also have to have our money last as long as we do. So longevity is one of the risks, and actually it's the number one fear for retirees is outliving their assets. Let's move on to the next risk that we have while we're debating when to retire. Our next risk is called sequence risk. When you retire can make a difference. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's look at this graph here, and we're making an assumption. Let's say we have $1 million in our portfolio and we're thinking of retiring. For that $1 million portfolio, we're going to take out 5% annually. That's $50,000 a year annually. And then we're going to take our portfolio and we're going to invest it in 60% stocks, 30% bonds, and 10% cash. So if we look at the green bar charts to the right, portfolio balance remaining after 10 years of withdrawals. Now remember, we were taking 5% for 10 years. So that's over 500,000 that we've taken since we started. 10 years after taking that withdrawal, our $1 million portfolio, if we retired in 1980, which is the green bar, we would still have $1,731,989 left. Well, what if we retired in 1990? Well, it still looks pretty good. We took that same 500,000 for that 10-year period, and our $1 million portfolio still grew, and we ended up with about 1.8 million. What if we retired in the year 2000? Well, that's a whole different story. If we retired in the year 2000, we would have actually ran out of money. We would have been negative about $472,000. So what happened there? Well, let's talk about what happened, and let's talk about this sequence of risk. This sequence of risk can be very different as far as what your outcome is and how long your investments will last, depending on, did you start taking monies out? Did you start retiring and start taking money out when the market was going up? Or did you retire just before 2000? And what happened in 2000? Well, what happened in 2000 is that we had the tech bubble. And during the tech bubble, the S&P 500 dropped down. So it declined, it lost 50% of its value. So imagine if you're taking 5% withdrawals, the market falls by 50%, then, and if you're to take the same $50,000 per year, then you're actually not taking 5% anymore. You're taking 10% of the portfolio because of the drop in value if you decided to take the same income. So sequence risk has a big difference on whether you retire when the market's up or if you retire and the market declines. That's what this chart is saying, and that's one of the risks that you have when you retire. So let's look at another risk that you could be facing. And this risk we're seeing today, actually. Well, we're seeing every day, but even more so these days. Inflation, erosion of purchasing power. So what is inflation? Well, inflation, if you think about it, it's $1 today will be worth less in the future because of inflation, meaning that the cost of goods, whether it's a new home, gallon of milk, or gallon of gas, they all keep increasing in prices. So inflation has a significant impact on your purchasing power and your future standard of living. So what is inflation? Inflation is measured by what's called CPI. CPI is the Consumer Price Index. So you've probably heard it on the news. CPI is up, and this hasn't been up this high in 40 years, but CPI is at 9.1%. Yes, 9.1%. So what that is saying is that the price of goods and services that we purchase in the CPI, which includes what's the price of food, what's the price of housing, transportation, medical, all of that, if you take that all together, and gas, we're up 9.1%. We haven't been this high in over 40 years. And why we're seeing inflation now at 9.1%? Well, we're calling this the supply chain disruption inflation. So how did we get here? Well, one of the reasons how we got here is because when Russia invaded Ukraine, then that reduced the oil supply of the world, and our oil supply which is the price of barrel of oil, which translates to those high gas pump prices that we're seeing every time we fill up our car. So because of the Russia invasion of Kuwait, and US companies need more pipeline and infrastructure so that they also aren't able to fill that gap. So that's why we're seeing higher oil prices, higher prices at the pump. And then we also have had a short supply of houses and cars. That's why we've seen car prices going up, housing prices going up. We've also seen where, because of the shortage of supply, of goods, whether it's houses or cars or gas, and too many people buying them. So what happens is that supply chain disruption, not being able to get those products or goods to us, and too much demand, that increases inflation, and that's how we got here today at 9.1%. So if we look at this chart, it shows a new home in 1994 was 106,000, and it's showing in 244 the projected cost of that new home is $835. If we go all the way to the right, the gallon of gas was $1.09 in 1994, and in 2044, the gallon of gas is showing at $5.87. And actually, if we look at the gas pump now, what is the price of gas, then we're already at $5.80. So that projection of 2044, we shall see it might be even higher than that. What we're also seeing is, because we have this high inflation, the Federal Reserve is raising rates to reduce demand. So they're raising rates, and you've seen that mortgage rates were under 3% for a while, then they went over 6%, and now they're hovering just under 6% for a mortgage. So what that does is it reduces the amount of people that are able to purchase a house, and the thought being that should bring down the prices of houses. And we're already starting to see that the supply of houses is much larger now. So the Federal Reserve is going to continue raising rates until they can get inflation to a lower level. So this is what we're up against right now. And it is getting better, though. With those interest rates rising, then we have seen a pullback in some of the demand. Okay. Another cause for concern, or another challenge that we have in retirement, is healthcare costs. Healthcare costs are pretty expensive, and they can be a challenge. We have health insurance premiums that have increased from 1999 to where we're at today to 239% it's increased. If we look at workers' earnings, it hasn't kept up with the cost of that insurance. So our worker earnings is up 68%, so health insurance premiums have gone up much more than that. So that means it's costing us more. Overall inflation is showing 51%, but that doesn't include what we're seeing today at the 9.1%. But another area, which is healthcare, is another consideration and another challenge while in retirement. What's some other challenges that we're going to come across while we're in retirement? Well, long-term care costs are staggering. Our long-term care services and supports are very expensive, and it is exceeding beneficiaries and families can afford today. So if we look at what is the typical cost of these types of services, well, if we look at a nursing facility, that's the first bar, that's showing $102,000 for a nursing care facility on an annual basis. That translates to $8,500 a month. That's quite a bit. If we look at home health care, that's $52,000 a year, which translates to about $4,400 a month. And then if we're just looking at some care, which is adult daycare, that's $19,500, which still translates to about a little over $1,600 a month. So this is some pretty expensive costs that if we need a nursing facility, that would be the most expensive, $8,500 a month. Home health care, we're talking about $4,400 a month. And the least expensive would be the daycare, but that's still over $1,600 a month. So what about Social Security? So I know not everybody with the city of San Diego has Social Security because they may not have paid into it, but some of you have. So I'll just go over this real quickly. If we look back in history, in 1950, there was 16 workers for each one person receiving Social Security. Today, it went from 16 workers to only 2.8 workers for each beneficiary. So what does that mean in today's dollars? That means the benefits owed currently exceeds what taxes are being collected to pay for that Social Security. And it's anticipated in 2035 that the Social Security Trust Fund will be exhausted. So what happens in 2035 or even before 2035 with Social Security? Well, I don't think Social Security is going away. What they can do, so that way US workers can receive Social Security, would be a few things. Number one, they can increase the payroll taxes, which is FICA. So you probably see that on your paycheck. FICA, F-I-C-A, and that's a Federal Insurance Contribution Act. So that's the amount they take out of your paycheck and goes into Social Security. That's FICA. So they'll probably be increasing that. The other thing they can do is they can decrease or delay benefits for people receiving Social Security in the future, or they may just do a combination of all of those. So stay tuned. Between now and 2035, you may be hearing something about Social Security, but I don't think it'll go away. I think that they'll find a way to either increase taxes, delay receiving benefits, or decreasing the benefits. So now that we've talked about all the different challenges that we can encounter while we're planning for retirement and in retirement, let's look at some different options to achieve a successful retirement. So what we're going to cover here in achieving a successful retirement, we're going to talk about how much are you going to withdraw from your account and what is a good amount to withdraw from your account. We're going to look at longevity risk and how to adjust that. We're going to understand the benefit of guaranteed income. We're going to look at how do we reduce our taxes that we pay and what is the right decision on those that are eligible and will be receiving Social Security, and then how to plan for any unexpected risks. So how long would your money have lasted if you decided to take a certain amount of a percent out of your retirement account? Well, let's take a look at that. If you chose to take out 3% from your portfolio, and remember our portfolio is invested 60% in stocks, that's the stock market, 30% in bonds, which is considered conservative, and 10% in cash. So we have 60% in the stock market and 40% in more conservative types of investments like bonds and cash. So with that allocation, we're going to be withdrawing 3% of that every year. Well, if we did that, then there's a 90% probability rate that it's going to last you for 50 years. If we decide we want to take out, let's say 6% of our portfolio every year, then it's going to last about 16 years. If we take out 10%, then the probability is that it's only going to last for 10 years. So this is very important to look at how much you withdraw, whether it's 3 or 4%. Usually a rule of thumb is 4%. But of course, the less that you take out, then the less chance that you'll run out of money and your money will last longer for you. So even if we decided to take out, let's say 4%, then we don't have to have it a withdrawal rate of 4% like forever. It's not set in concrete. So you do want to adjust your plan as you go. So let's say we start taking out our 4%. That's our withdrawal rule. And let's say that our portfolio return goes negative because the market is down. So what we can do then is to perhaps take out less. So reduce our 4% to maybe 3.5% or 3% until the market recovers. So that's the withdrawal rule, to reduce your withdrawals. And then because this portfolio is a 4% withdrawal, which also includes inflation, what that means is another way that you can reduce taking monies out is to not increase it for inflation. The next area is capital preservation rule. So what all that just means is that perhaps you can look at how you're spending your money, and if you have the ability to reduce your spending. So maybe if you're going out to eat dinner, 3 times a week, maybe you can cut it back to twice a week. So by cutting spending, then that'll help also to preserve your monies. Prosperity rule. I like the prosperity rule, and most people do. With the prosperity rule, that means that the market is on an uptrend and we're in a bull market. We've been making some good returns, year after year. So when that happens, then you can increase your spending. You can use some of those profits and then, reward yourself, splurge a little bit. So that's the prosperity rule. So even if you start a withdrawal plan of 4%, you want to adjust it to seeing if you can reduce your spending, or you can also adjust it when the market's down to maybe take less, and then when the market's higher to take a higher amount. So it doesn't have to be set in stone. Longevity risk. We talked about that now we're really seeing that people are living longer. So let's take a look at this. Let's take a look at 2 different portfolios. If we look at a portfolio being conservative, that means only 20% is in stocks in the market and 80% is more conservative types of investments. What that 90% means in that green box is that we have a 90% probability that that portfolio, and with a 5% annual withdrawal rate, that your monies will last 20 years. But what about the 30 and 40 years? You can see the probability of your monies lasting 30 or 40 years goes down by 34% for 30 years and only 9% probability that you will have money in 40 years. Let's look at the next portfolio called the balanced portfolio. That one has more stocks, more stock market exposure. So the conservative portfolio had 20% stock. The balanced fund has 60% stock or stock market exposure and 40% in more conservative investments such as bonds or cash. If we look at the 20-year time frame, that has a 96% probability that your money's going to last. But if we look at the 30 and 40 years, it does go down from 96 to 78 and 57, but that's still a pretty good probability that 30 years later, there's a 78 probability that you're still going to have monies and you're not going to outlive it. And 40 years, that's a 57% probability. So what does this tell us? So this tells us that if you had a 20-year retirement, and if you have a high probability of success withdrawing the 5% per year, even if it's a conservative or a balanced portfolio, that those monies are going to last for the 20 years. But if you live longer, remember we looked at longevity, that people are living longer because of medical technology. So that's another 30 or possibly 40 years. If that happens, then you have a higher probability of running out of money with the conservative portfolio than you would with the balanced portfolio. What's another way that we can improve our results? Well, here's another option. Let's say we have $1 million and we have it invested in that balanced portfolio, 60% equities, 40% in bonds, and we take that same 5% withdrawal every year. Over 30 years, the portfolio has a 77% chance that the portfolio will not be depleted. So that means that chances are that that money's going to last for those 30 years. Now, what if we add a guaranteed income? What if we took that $1 million and instead of just putting it into that balanced portfolio, what if we put $750,000 into that balanced portfolio? And what if we carved out $250,000 and we purchased a what's called a immediate annuity or a guaranteed immediate annuity that's going to generate a certain amount of income for us, and we still have that 5% withdrawal rate. So the only difference here is we've added that fixed annuity into this portfolio. Then over the 30 years, there's a 94% chance remaining that the portfolio won't be depleted. So we just increased our percentage or our confidence level that we won't be running out of money, just that one change. One thing to be concerned about as well is how do we be smart about paying taxes? Now, Uncle Sam's always going to get his share, but if we look at where our income tax bracket's at, then this chart gives us a good plan on where we should be taking our monies. So for example, if we're in the very top of this upside down pyramid, that's 37%. So let's say we're in the 35 or 37% tax bracket. That means that we'll want to utilize some tax-free income sources to reduce our taxes. Now, if you're in a, let's say 22% bracket, then you can take some withdrawals from a taxable account. If you're in a lower tax bracket, let's say 10% or 12, then it makes sense to withdraw from tax deferred accounts. So tax deferred accounts would be like your 401k. Taxable accounts would be like your checking or savings. Tax-free sources of income, but we're going to talk about that next. One way to have a source of tax-free income in retirement is called the Roth strategy. So what is a Roth strategy? So the Roth strategy is that when you put monies into a Roth, and after 59 and a half, your age 59 and a half, and after you retire and you've held the Roth for 5 years, then everything in the Roth, earnings, principal, everything in the Roth, when you take that out, is tax-free. So that is a nice source of income if you have a Roth for tax-free income, and you also have perhaps your 401k. Now it shows here with a Roth, there's no mandatory withdrawals at age 70. Well, that has changed. The minimum mandatory distribution for traditional IRAs and 401ks is 72. Now that was raised, that minimum mandatory distribution, from 70 and a half to 72 by the Secure Act of 2019. So for traditional IRAs and 401ks, retirement accounts, it has changed the minimum mandatory distribution to 72. Now, this is still true. For a Roth, there is no RMD, or required mandatory distribution, at all, not at 70 and a half, not at 72. And the reason for that is because the government isn't going to receive any taxes from you at 72 or 70 and a half. So there is no requirement that you have to take monies out of a Roth, because remember, it's going to be all tax-free. So having a portion of your retirement savings in a Roth IRA can help you to pay less taxes, because maybe you're going to supplement your income with some tax-free income in retirement, along with some of your retirement account or your other sources of income. So we'll just go through this section pretty quickly. Making the right decisions on Social Security. Social Security. You can start claiming Social Security at age 62. That's when you're eligible to start receiving that. And that's if you've paid into Social Security, then at age 62 is when you're first eligible to start receiving it. But you can also wait till your full retirement age at 66. So the ages are depending on when you're born. It could be 65, 66, or 67. The last age, which is age 70, if you delayed receiving your Social Security till age 70, that's when you're going to get the largest payment. Now, if you decide to start receiving it at age 62, then you're going to get the least amount, of course. But every year you decide not to take Social Security, it goes up by 8% per year. And that is every year all the way up until age 70. After age 70, you don't have that benefit any longer. It doesn't go up by 8% per year. It just remains that same. So it doesn't make sense for you to not start collecting it at that point. A lot of decisions goes into, when are you going to receive it? Maybe because your income is not going to be enough to cover your expenses, you might opt to receive it at age 62. Or maybe if you're not in very good health, you might decide to take it earlier than later. But if you have longevity, you have sufficient income, you may be one of those people that decides, or retirees, to take it at age 70. So everybody's different. It's really a personal and financial decision. What are some other specific risks that we can run into, and what's the solution? Unexpected healthcare costs. Well, for that, you can have a supplemental Medicare coverage, or that you put aside monies, every time you have additional monies or monthly, you put it into emergency fund in the event you have those unexpected healthcare costs. Catastrophic medical or long-term care costs. That's where life insurance or long-term care insurance can be a solution. But what about lawsuits or creditors? That's where we have what's called irrevocable trusts. What about the cost of probate? Probate can be expensive. Well, a revocable trust can help in that situation, because revocable trusts, whatever asset you have in your revocable trust that's titled in your revocable trust, does not go through probate, but then neither does retirement accounts with a designated beneficiary, does not go through probate as well. Spending children's inheritance, you can do that with a irrevocable life insurance trust. Or if you want to give charities a donation, then you can look at doing that through a charitable trust. Or if you want to donate securities or properties, then that can also happen within a charitable trust. Practical approaches to managing income. So we use what's called the bucket approach. So what you're doing is you have 3 buckets: short-term, mid-term, long-term. And the short-term, mid-term, long-term is your different income buckets. So if you have immediate cash needs, let's say that you need to pay bills, then or you know that something's coming up in a short time frame, within that 3 year or less, then you're going to be probably putting that into cash, CDs, money market, short-term bonds, or you're going to be taking it out of your wages. So that's your short-term income bucket. Your mid-term income bucket would be something where something comes up, maybe you're going to need a car in 5 years. So that's the 5 to 10 year time frame. And with that, you're probably going to have bonds or certain annuities that mature at that period of time, or you may have some balanced types of funds within that bucket. Now, the longer term bucket would be for your hedge against inflation. This is going to address your longevity risk. It's also going to be the highest risk, highest potential return for that 10+ year time frame. That's where you're going to see your growth stocks or your mutual funds, real estate, or commodities, because they are very volatile and they do typically take time for them to appreciate in value, but they have been historically one of the best inflation hedges that is even higher than fixed income, bonds, or cash. So high risk, high return, that's where we're going to have that in that long-term bucket. Now, remember when we talked about when the value of your investments or your growth stock funds appreciates, that's when you're going to start pruning it. You're going to take some of those monies and then replenish either the midterm or the short-term bucket. So you're going to keep replenishing those short-term or midterm buckets. And that's the bucket approach. And what you also want to do is you want to match expenses with your income sources. Your expenses are usually discretionary expenses, essential expenses, or emergency expenses. Now, the discretionary expenses would be, travel, entertainment. Your essential expenses, though, of course, is food, housing, transportation, things that usually have a fixed cost. Now, if we look at the essential expenses, then those are usually going to be paid by your pension income, your fixed income, RMDs, or Social Security. Your emergency expenses would be monies that you set aside for that rainy day fund, is usually what we call that. Your discretionary expenses is going to be where, remember we talked about maybe you're going out to dinner for 5 days a week or 3 days a week, and if money gets a little bit tight, we can always usually reduce that discretionary expenses. Or if it's the other way around, we've had some great time in the market and our investments have increased, then we may be able to spend more in that area. But you want to match your expenses with your income sources. So closing thoughts. It's critical for investors to prepare for the certain and the uncertain risks by doing some of the planning that we talked about, whether we're looking at our allocation of our investments, how much are we taking out, what is our decision for Social Security, how much should we save. So these are all very vital and important decisions that you're going to be using and needing. You don't have to do this alone though. So meet with your financial advisor and assess where you are today, what your plan is for the future, if you're planning on retiring or you're in retirement. Meet with your financial advisors to go through, figure out a plan, and come up with a good roadmap. And the reason why you want to do this, of course, is because we all want to have a very comfortable, secure retirement, and there is help for that. Here's some additional help or resources on the web: AARP, Social Security Administration, Elder Web, Medicare, a lot of good websites that can help us and be resources for planning for retirement or in retirement. Again, schedule a complimentary, no obligation appointment. You can contact us today. Here's my contact information. You can just reach out to me, give me a call or email me. You can also visit the California Coast website. But I hope this information that I presented to you today has got you thinking about strategies to help you ensure your comfortable and secure retirement for the future. Thank you. And then that concludes our presentation.
Thank you so much, Sandra. That was great. I appreciate your time today. And I wanted to remind everyone that we do have another webinar coming in August 17th. That topic will be the importance of financial planning. And I'd like to see if my colleague from Business Development, Karen, is available to share some thoughts as well. Karen, are you there? Karen, if you're talking, you're muted. All right, she may not be able to chat, but while she's, in case
Can
she
you
is,
hear me?
oh, there you are.
Oh, yeah.
We can hear you now. Yep.
Okay, great. Yeah, for some reason, I didn't have any controls. They were taken away. So I didn't have the mute, unmute. I didn't have any of that stuff. So that's one of the things, but I have it now. So I'm actually handle the relationship between California Coast Credit Union and the City of San Diego. So you can always reach out to me if you've got any questions regarding the credit union, anything that we've talked about today. I can always get you in touch with Miss Sandra, who always does an amazing presentation. I always love sitting in with you, Sandra.
Thank you.
Hopefully we can all get back together here soon. So yeah, if you you can reach out to me. Christine, did you put my contact information up?
No, Karen, but I can do that in the chat right now.
Okay. Yeah, just because I don't have, my chat's been disabled, so I couldn't follow along with anything. So if you want to just put my contact information, people, if you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me, and I will get you in the right direction and answer any questions that you have regarding the credit union.
Okay, great. I think, Karen, you have access now. Sorry about that. And if there's any, just do, I wanted to do a last call out. If there's any questions for Sandra or Karen, this would be a great time. Okay, I do see a question here, and I'm going to read it out loud for you, Sandra, or Karen. With rising mortgage interest rates, is it better to pay cash in full if you have some money saved up instead of getting a loan?
I would say don't buy right now. Don't buy a mortgage right now. Hold on to your cash. That's what I would do. I mean, right now we're going into some uncharted waters with the markets, and you wouldn't want to go out and pay top dollar for a mortgage when the pricing could be coming down. Hold on, wait until the market stabilizes, and then if you want to pay cash, I would say always try to get a mortgage. Yeah, you're paying interest, but you can always control that by paying more to principal. But just getting rid of that big nest. I mean, unless you've got a lot of money to where you're not going to miss that petty cash. I mean, I would always do a mortgage, just that way you have your write-off too. What's your thoughts on that, Sandra?
Oh, I agree with you. I definitely agree with you. I think that the inflation and the mortgage rates that we're seeing now, we've actually already seen them going down because they were over 6%. And now we're seeing them more at like 5.5%. And we're also seeing more homes inventory coming on the market. So, you know, who knows what's going to happen in the future, but I do think that we're already seeing sellers reducing their prices on their homes. And I think that this is just going to be a temporary situation. And I agree with Karen that you may have a better opportunity, even if you are going to buy cash, maybe to buy it at a cheaper price in the future.
That's right. Absolutely correct. But yeah, please, I'm a senior mortgage loan officer. So if you've got mortgage questions, please, here's my email. Shoot me a quick email. Let's get in touch. Let's talk.